Hello and welcome to the 8 News Now Investigators streaming show. I'm Kyle Paine. I'm joined by my colleague Vanessa Murphy, but first I want to make sure everyone knows every Monday at 7 we have this Investigators program, usually one of us up here talking about some of the hard work that we do. And then also, Vanessa has her show, High Heels and Hidden Truths, Wednesday at 7. And in fact, while we talk about the Nathan Chasing Horse case today, on 2 days from now, when you're watching this, you'll have a more in-depth look at that case from the perspective of some of the people who were involved.
Yes.
And so that is must-see TV. And Vanessa, welcome. Basically, we're going to talk about the hard work that you did over the course of several weeks of trial on what really was a captivating criminal case and, frankly, disgusting. It was a disgusting case of someone who was convicted, if I look at my notes, of 10 counts of sexual assault with a victim under 16, 1 count of sexual assault, 1 count of possession of visual pornography depicting a person under 16. So essentially, this man was accused of and ultimately convicted of getting over on 3 women, 3 young girls, 3 people, 2 of whom were young women at the time, younger than the age of consent. And ultimately, a judge gave him 37 years to life. You were in the courtroom from beginning to end. In fact, why don't you start from the very beginning? You were out there the night he got arrested.
Yeah, so we received a tip, I won't say how, about what was unfolding at his home in North Las Vegas. And I received a lot of information that night about this criminal case. And we knew that he had lived in this house in North Las Vegas with several women who are referred to as his wives,
right.
Multiple wives. And police went in, Metro Police, other agencies with a search warrant. We also call it a raid, right? And he was arrested at that time. And the more we learned about this, the more we said, my goodness, there's just so much to this case. We learned that he was the leader of a group known as the Circle with many followers. We learned that he was a self-proclaimed medicine man in the indigenous culture, meaning people would go to him for ceremonies and guidance. He had quite a following. We learned that he was in the movie Dances with Wolves. I believe his name was Smiles a lot.
Something like that, yes.
He was in maybe some other films as well. So this was a case that really got our attention, but at the heart of it, it was about sexual abuse by someone with a lot of power in his culture and in his group.
Which he is said to have abused. He is said that to have preyed on people who perhaps thought he was a very high status and really made something of it. It wasn't like sort of like a one-time thing. It was a long, involved process. These people got tattoos as part of the Circle.
Yes.
They were indoctrinated in a sense, I think is easy to say. But in the beginning, to me, it seemed like you went out there and it was this actor that we hadn't heard from Dances with Wolves in 30 years. So, but the movie, people knew what it was. And so he wasn't a household name. Did you have any idea when you went out there that it was going to be so big?
I didn't. I mean, I knew it would be something important to cover, but I don't think I realized the extent of what our coverage would be. And, one aspect that we were trying to balance, when I reported on his arrest, I had so many people reach out to me on social media to say, he did that to me, or I know someone he did this to, or he did this to my loved one and they're no longer alive and they'll never get justice. It was sort of like, oh my gosh, I think even that first weekend or following week, I was getting these messages. And, we have to be careful, right? As journalists, we have standards, we have ethics we have to follow. So I couldn't report everything. I had to request an interview with them, ask for, well, do you have any documentation, right? But who has documentation of sexual abuse? So it was a balance. I wanted to give people a voice.
Well,
But
it turns out he did, though.
well,
Right?
in some cases.
He had some videos that were his undoing, essentially, which I was in the courtroom when they played those. I actually left the courtroom for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is I don't ever need to see that in order to do my job. I know that some people, they want to cover the trial. They immerse themselves in it. No, thank you. Our photographer stayed. I don't think he's ever going to be the same after having watched that. But you also not only learned that this was not a well-kept secret in the circle or in the community.
Right. And that was noted in the report that people had complained about him for like 2 decades. And individuals had seen him with young girls, clearly young girls. They would see him and then they might become one of his wives later. We also know that's called grooming, which his attorney did not like that word. He said it was trendy, but guess what? It's a real thing, grooming. Giving a lot of attention, giving gifts, making someone feel really special, and then slowly manipulating them. That was happening. My question as a reporter, but especially as an investigative reporter, was what happened? How did this go on for nearly 2 decades? Who dropped the ball? It's not on the victims. Many of them came forward and reported him to authorities. But, people thought, well, it's he said, she said. We don't have DNA. We don't have evidence. Maybe they didn't dig enough. But this man abused people for years.
And ultimately, one of his victims separated from him and the circle.
Yes.
And
Karenna
got upset and sent a tweet out to the masses.
She made a post on Facebook. A very long post sharing her experience. And it eventually got the attention of the right people at Las Vegas Metro.
They took it seriously.
They did their due diligence. They realized, hey, this is not the first time someone has alleged abuse at the hands of this man. So Karenna Leon LaCroix helped bust this open. I always report that because I think it's really important. Her voice spurred so much change and helped hold this man accountable.
And she's one of the people who we'll hear from in your episode on Wednesday.
Yes.
When we come back, we'll watch Vanessa's coverage of this trial and get a little bit deeper. Stay with us. Welcome back to the 8 News Now streaming show in our 8 News Now streaming center. I'm Kyle Paine, along with investigative reporter Vanessa Murphy. Vanessa did an excellent job covering the Nathan Chasing Horse case, was at trial the entire time, and then during the sentencing, which we're going to focus on right now. So he was convicted. I was on live television when he was convicted. We covered it live on our television product, and he was convicted of 13 of 21 accounts. So there were some things that he didn't get convicted of, like kidnapping and some other things. So I actually went on one of these streaming shows and said, I don't think he's going to get life because I didn't think that it was a slam dunk in that there were quite a few charges he didn't get. But prior to sentencing, I know Nathan Chasing Horse's attorney tried to get a motion for reconsideration or motion for a new trial, and then he disparaged the victims in order to try and get the sentencing either delayed or wiped out. Tell me about that.
So Craig Mueller, his defense attorney,
who has an obligation to keep his client out of prison.
He has to try to protect his client and his rights, but he argued about payments to the victims, which prosecutors said didn't happen yet. And under Nevada state law, there is a crime victims fund for expenses like perhaps counseling, a variety of expenses that I've gone through in my coverage, in my news articles on 8newsnow.com. But so the victims can apply for that money and get it. It's not like, hey, come to trial and testify against this person and I'll give you 10 grand. That's not it. It's looked at more as like a reimbursement for their expenses.
Sure. And Attorney Mueller did succeed in getting the ultimate sentencing delayed, but did not affect the eventual outcome. But it's interesting because if I remember correctly, Mueller was not his first attorney, and the attorneys that he had when he originally got arrested, and the case was in North Las Vegas, they were arguing that the victims never said no, and they went to appeal to the state Supreme Court, and it started to work a little bit. One time, they dismissed certain charges because of grooming. Grooming wasn't
one of the main. So he was represented initially by the Clark County Public Defender's Office. His main attorney, I believe her name is Christy Holton, or I hope I said that correctly. She was a bulldog. She really was. And this reached the Nevada Supreme Court. She made these arguments. And the Nevada Supreme Court did agree with Chasing Horse and his public defender that the prosecutors should not have presented certain information to the grand jury about grooming because grooming isn't a charge. I'm trying to explain it in the simplest terms, but they did find fault with grooming. So then Chasing Horse was re-indicted. The prosecutors had to go back and be careful with that term.
There was a lot of legal maneuvering.
And you know what? Like, those are his rights, right? His attorneys can do those things. On the other side, for the victims, it's hard. And we see this all the time, not just with a case like this, but any case. It's difficult because we see court cases get pushed back or a date rescheduled for one reason or another. And so that was hard. It was like 3 years. He was arrested in January of 2023 and then convicted January 2026 and then sentenced April 2026. So many delays. Also, one thing I want to note, Kyle, especially with a sexual abuse trial, Craig Mueller, his defense attorney, has to do his job and try to poke holes in the witnesses' stories. And many times, you know, there were 3 victims in this case. As you mentioned, Chasing Horse was accused, now convicted of sexually abusing 2 of them when they were children, when they were underage. Mueller has to try to poke holes in their stories, and it's uncomfortable. They're talking about sexual abuse, and here he is grilling them. So it really takes a lot for these women to come forward.
Let's watch Vanessa's report of that sentencing day.
The judge sentencing Nathan Chasing Horse to 37 years to life in prison and making sure he is serving time for each of the 3 named victims in this case.
This whole ordeal has been a recurring nightmare.
He took away my sense of safety.
Nathan Chasing Horse took my childhood.
The 3 women at the center of the Las Vegas case speaking of the trauma they endured at the hands of the self-proclaimed medicine man.
I did not do these things.
While Chasing Horse breaks his silence.
And this is a miscarriage of justice.
Clark County District Judge Jessica Peterson noting his lack of apology.
It strikes me that, Mr. Chasing Horse, that you can stand here and say that you are not guilty of these crimes.
While there was no DNA proof in this sexual abuse case, there was evidence like video prosecutors showed the jury of Chasing Horse recording himself sexually abusing a child. She is now an adult facing him in this courtroom. Testimony from all 3 women played a major part in the trial.
Guilty of sexual assault with a minor.
The jury returning a guilty verdict in January. Las Vegas Metro investigated after Corena Leon LaCroix's Facebook post about years of abuse by the leader of the circle. Girls and women like Sierra Begay previously reported Chasing Horse to other police agencies, but the system failed them.
I came forward in 2014 and nothing happened from that, unfortunately, and so this is definitely a second chance at justice.
Multiple women throughout the United States and Canada have reached out to the 8 News Now investigators alleging Chasing Horse sexually abused them. While it has taken decades to hold Chasing Horse accountable, The survivors and their supporters noting the importance of this sentencing in the indigenous community and for victims of sexual abuse.
And to come here and actually see something come as a fruition to all of it is the biggest honor of my life.
Chasing Horse will receive credit for time already served in jail. That knocks a few years off of that 37-year sentence, but at about 50 years old, he will likely serve the rest of his life in prison. Reporting in downtown Las Vegas, Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
Vanessa, it strikes me watching that you were able to capture all of that perspective and all of that in 2.5 minutes. It's excellent. Do you have any thoughts in the moments we had before break after watching that?
One thing, and I mentioned it in there, and you mentioned it in the first segment. I mean, we saw the video of him recording himself sexually abusing a child. This was clearly a child. He was clearly a grown man. And that's what the judge was reiterating to him. How can you stand here and say you are innocent when we all saw that video? And I think for the jurors, that video did it for them.
We spoke with the jurors. We'll peel the curtain back a little bit and talk about how it works behind the scenes when we come back. Welcome back to the 8 News Now Investigator streaming show. Kyle Paine, along with investigative reporter Vanessa Murphy. Vanessa covered the Nathan Chasing Horse trial more than anyone. And Vanessa, we just were talking before the break about the jury foreman. We had an exclusive interview. Ryan Tismaneski got the jury foreman who told us that watching those videos took some of her innocence away. And they did deliberate for a decent amount of time. But that video was damning.
It was horrendous. It was very upsetting. And I saw a piece of it. Our photographer saw the entire video. And I think he saw it right before a weekend, and he was
Friday.
Upset all weekend. We obviously try to keep our opinions out of our stories and do our best to remain balanced. But once you see something like that, we're all human. It was disgusting. It was atrocious. And unfortunately, I mean, it helped hold him accountable.
Sure. And it's interesting because I was in the courtroom for some of that and also for the defense of some of that, in which Nathan Chasing Horse's defense attorney had to sort of go through the pictures and video and say, how do you know that those private parts belong to a younger person? And they had a doctor come on and say, well, maybe this aspect of it could be someone of a certain age, to try and show the jury, well, maybe we don't know this is a child. And then he had another person come in who used to work at the hotel that they were said to have brought some of these victims, to say, is that a curtain from that hotel room?
I think Imperial Palace.
Right, which is now the Link?
Yes. Wow.
So anyway, I was saying when we were off camera, and I've said this to you a million times, sitting across from you is like watching a master class in reporting. You come back from something and you build your stories. I mean, and there's always so many different angles. But in this one, there were not only angles and victims, but there were other jurisdictions. So the next thing I know, I remember helping you or working with you to write a letter to courts elsewhere.
Yes. To try to get the information. Right. You're an attorney.
I don't think it worked.
No.
I think I failed.
No, I think it did help. We did get some of the documents, but prosecutors in one of their arguments wanted to present that additional information that there were other individuals who had reported alleged abuse to other jurisdictions, right? And we wanted copies of that, and we did get some of that. So your letter did work.
I didn't know that.
So thank you.
And then, but also that was Montana. Then Canada got involved, and when all of those things happen, you start hearing other things, and he's wanted, or he left his circle. Let's say in Montana became a circle in Las Vegas.
Well, I think they moved around a lot, and traveled right to different ceremonies and powwows, and so he would travel, and that's why perhaps You see Canada throughout the U.S.
There was nothing good about this case, but
No.
what was very interesting was it was almost like you got a tutorial in some Native American ancestry and culture, and you learned about these ancient ideas and events that they have.
But we certainly, in learning about this case, I had to text people. I had to call me and say, hey, I want to be respectful. Can you explain this to me? This is my first time hearing this or learning this. And they were always willing to help me. And I wanted to report it the right way. I wanted to report respectfully to these individuals, but also to the indigenous culture.
And not to make light at all, but you did do it right. And when I did it, because I was not there every day and I have sometimes very limited time, I generalized as much as possible to try and make sure I didn't say the wrong thing. Because once I felt like I got into detail, then I know that I'm exposed. I don't know enough about Native American culture. But so we had this thing spread to Montana and to Canada, but then the national, international news started to call you. So what happens in those cases?
I mean, they called almost immediately. Different production companies reached out. Some showed up in court here and there. And I did not really participate very much in those interviews. Maybe I answered some questions behind the scenes to help people, but to help other journalists. But it was interesting because so many people expressed interest at the start. And like they weren't at the sentencing, they weren't at the trial, so I don't really know what happened because this is a case that is groundbreaking. This is a case that deserves a lot of attention.
Well, it also separates the wheat from the chaff in the sense that you were there to do the hard work of the daily reporting and to really dig. And sometimes media in general can be superficial, and the national media covering the world, doesn't necessarily want to get into the nitty gritty. And you did. I thought you did a fantastic job. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what's coming up on Wednesday at 7 on your High Heels and Hidden Truths for people who have a little more interest in the Nathan Chasing Horse case?
Well, it may already have aired, but then it will go on YouTube.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I had sat down with Karenna right before the sentencing. We met her, we did an interview, and then we covered the sentencing. So I wanted to show more of my interview with her when it was more quiet, get her thoughts on what was going to happen.
You had made a comment before earlier in the show about, the length of these trials and the twists and turns that they take. And one of the risks that happens is that a sexual assault victim, a victim in general, isn't necessarily dying to testify, to tell their story.
Right.
Sometimes you don't know that someone's going to come. And in this case, we had someone who, surprisingly, the length of the trial may have made her actually appetite for testifying happen, and she showed up.
So two of the women were willing to testify from the start. The woman, now an adult, who was the child victim in the disturbing video we all saw, was not cooperating with police or authorities. She came to trial to testify, which was quite a surprise to many people because I believe they just thought she's still not going to cooperate, she's not going to testify. And then she showed up and she said, "That was me." And it really it was chilling.
That was me in the video.
Yes.
Right. And so we see these moments on television where the courtroom doors open and in walks a star witness.
Yes.
We do not see it in the ho-hum day-to-day trials that we
Right.
cover. Even if they're, sensational murder trials, you never actually have that moment. And this was one of those made-for-TV moments.
It was jaw-dropping, and she did not want to be identified. And from the start, we did not identify her. That's why in
she
our
wasn't in
news
your
story,
story.
you just saw her hands and you heard her voice.
But we certainly got her story. Look, that was a excellent job covering that trial. Thank you for sitting here with me and talking about it.
I covered it too, so
I know it's not easy. Every Monday at 7, the Investigators Show airs on this streaming show. We have a good time up here, even though some of these stories are hard to talk about.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed it as well. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.